Welcome to Horizons of Thought. Today I'm going to talk to you about reasons why people in government suppress speech. And the most common and obvious reason why governments suppress speech is that they don't want to be criticized. They don't want to risk getting lots of people getting together and disagreeing with the government enough that they're willing to do something about it violently or even peacefully to overthrow the governments who are in power. It's nice to be the king. It's nice to have power, and it's not so nice when you're thrown out of power. Throughout history, rulers who've been thrown out of power have often found themselves very dead, and they really don't relish the opportunity to die this way. So, somewhat understandably, they've restricted speech. Another reason why people have restricted speech throughout history is that they don't want the cherished institutions of their society to be criticized because they see these things as lasting longer than their governments. This may be rulers, this may be religious institutions, but these particular structures are seen as outlasting any individual ruler and as being a pillar of the community, as supporting structures that are necessary to maintain the social order. That notion of social order comes up a lot if you read any history on why freedom of speech has been suppressed. The idea that social order matters a lot because it maintains the peace, prevents revolutions, and causes people to live better lives. Another reason that's commonly used for suppressing freedom of speech is in order to prevent obscenity or pornography from being produced. This particular argument, again, is used in order to prevent people from corrupting youth and young minds so that people can grow up and maintain connections to the societies that they live in. Having said that, we've also seen cases in history where attempts to prevent pornography have also been attempts to prevent sex education. In cases like that, you can find yourselves with lots of people having difficulty preventing STDs, lots of people having difficulty dealing with pregnancies, and lots of people not knowing how to rear their babies particularly well because they don't understand sex education, they don't understand early childhood development, they don't understand breastfeeding. So when you have rules like this, you can find that there's corruption in people's understanding of these rules, that not just trying to prevent the corruption of youth, but also trying to prevent people from understanding their own bodies and their own selves. That brings me to the next one. In the United States, when the country was founded, the founding fathers of the United States put a lot of effort into making sure that they had maximum freedom of speech allowed in the country. They basically said people could say anything, anytime, and those are in their original founding documents. But very quickly, a very important restriction on freedom of speech came in, and that is the preventing of incitement to violence. You can have speakers get up and they will try to form a riot. They will try to get people to be violent, act out in the streets, and do what they want. And so very early on, Supreme Courts in the United States made rulings that were designed to limit freedom of speech on these grounds. But again, this particular analysis can be abused. We're living in a society today where violence is getting redefined. I think it's not so hard to understand extreme cruelty and emotional abuse as a kind of violence. But we're actually running into a situation where violence is being redefined as people saying mean things as a one-off, or people saying things that we disagree with. And if you redefine violence that way, it's very easy to abuse this restriction on freedom of speech, which might seem reasonable at first. But if you've redefined violence as having to hear things you don't want to hear, or having to hear mean things as a one-off, then you'll then use this particular rule in order to try to restrict people's speech. And that might seem silly, but there are cases in the United Kingdom today where people who believe there's a biological basis to gender are finding themselves, and say so on Twitter, are finding themselves visited by police. And the police are asking them why they're doing this. It seems very arcane to most people who are likely to listen to this channel and very strange, but this is something that's coming up. Restrictions on freedom of speech of this kind have shown up more and more across the developed world. And at the same time, another reason for restricting freedom of speech that's shown up is to prevent confusion. Now, this might sound silly, but I'll try to explain it. In the early days of the times after post 9/11, when they were adding more restrictions to airplane travel in order to prevent terrorist activity like the kind that caused the destruction of the World Trade Towers and damage to the Pentagon in the United States, they started implementing rules, say, telling people that when you're standing in line, if you start talking about terrorism or making jokes about it, you might find yourself pulled out of that line. Maybe you'll get interrogated a lot. Maybe you'll get a fine. Maybe you won't be allowed into the country. Maybe you'll find yourself in jail. The idea being that these jokes or these stories confuse the staff because they can't tell the difference between a real act of terrorism being planned and somebody who's discussing the topic. Again, that might sound silly to some of my viewers, but right now we're living with that with YouTube quite a bit. So for instance, if I were to talk about certain countries of the mid-20th century, certain rulers who ruled Germany and who ruled Italy in great detail, this channel, if I were to turn on monetization, might get demonetized because these are not topics that the automatic computer systems that are listening to the speech inside of Google that are trying to determine whether or not I'm meeting community standards, they can't always tell the difference between a discussion about mid-20th century countries, criticism about mid-20th century Germany and Italy, or endorsement of the policies of mid-20th century Germany or Italy. Another one that's come up right now is the virus that shall not be named, which is now spreading all over the world. Were I to name this virus, again, this channel, were I to turn on monetization, might lose the monetization because the computer programs can't tell whether I'm talking about it, whether I'm spreading fake news, or whether I'm spreading useful information about it. And advertisers, they don't want to touch that. They don't want to deal with that. They don't want to have their brands and their names attached to things and have people get it wrong. So YouTube's response is to do what they can to prevent advertisers and their advertisements from showing up on channels that are violating these rules, simply in the name of confusion. So there are lots of reasons why freedom of speech is suppressed in various forms. Those reasons can sometimes seem good in one analysis. They may seem reasonable, but they're very easy to abuse. They're very easy to take too far or even corrupt entirely from the original intent. So have a care when you think about what kinds of speech you want restricted, because everybody actually does want some things restricted. But have a care about what kinds of speech you want restricted when you think about your philosophical stances on these topics, and consider that you can be wrong. It's very, very difficult to figure this out and make this right. This is why I personally make the argument that's similar to the founding fathers of the United States, that you want to err on the side of letting people speak as much as you possibly can in order to make sure that people who disagree with each other at least have the opportunity to hear different points of view and learn them. So with that, thank you very much for coming to Horizons of Thought and listening to this channel. If you are interested in this channel, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. If you are interested in supporting this channel, please go down to Donor Box at the link at the bottom of this video and send a subscription through Donor Box. People who subscribe through Donor Box will support this channel and its growth, and will be given preferential treatment in your comments, because there will come a time soon where I want to use the comments from these videos in order to respond to them and come up with new topics. Really high subscribers will be able to directly communicate their particular topics that they might want discussed on Horizons of Thought, so that we can work together and come up with particular topics. As you'll see in my upcoming videos, my plans in the future are not just to summarize the ways in which we deal with freedom of speech, but to actually explore specific topics and lots of different points of views and arguments for why it is that people think what they do. Thank you very much for coming, and have a great day.